Thank you very much. When we speak of Pakistan's relationship with IMF, it has a very turbulent history. What we have seen over the past 30 years, that Pakistan and IMF agree on it and to basically stabilize our macroeconomic situation. And then for a year and a half, Pakistan does the compliance. When the things improve a little bit, normally Pakistan retracts and the program does not get completed. And then, after 4 or 5 years, Pakistan gets into the same trouble and we go back to the IMF. So what has happened this time is that because the previous program could not be, completed, so IMF and Pakistan in July agreed on a standby arrangement for almost 9 months for $3 billion. Now, what this standby arrangement is, that it basically pushes a country, it's a stopgap arrangement. It was basically done that because IMF was clearly looking at a new government after the elections. So to bridge the gap, they agreed with Pakistan a program. Now, this program, basically, the way they do is they call it prior actions, and then there are triggers to certify those actions so that a tranche can be disbursed. They disbursed the first tranche of 1.2 billion immediately, and now there are 2 more tranches of IMF which are to be disbursed over the next 2 reviews, like this review, and there's a 1 more review by March when this standby arrangement basically ends. So that is where Pakistan stands at the moment. Now, what are these benchmarks or the prior actions which IMF is requiring from Pakistan? The first and the foremost is that they want Pakistan's fiscal reforms or the fiscal deficit to remain under the prescribed limits, which is around 7% for this particular review. And they are watching Pakistan's ability to service its very mounting high debt. Fiscal space and the debt servicing is the first benchmark which they will review. The review preparations and initial dialogues have started. Secondly, they want to ensure that Pakistan meets its budgetary commitments and also keeps the exchange rate, as per the market based determination rather than managing the exchange rate. So that is IMF reviews, next prior action. IMF also very keenly, will watch in this review that in terms of Pakistan, some reform in energy sector and also on the state-owned enterprise losses, that what the country is doing. So that is how these 4 basically the benchmarks or 4 prior actions will be reviewed. If I very quickly comment, Pakistan seems confident this time that they have managed to meet, most of expectations of the review team, and the review will be successful and Pakistan will get a disbursement. And to back up their claim, state bank reserves have been reasonably good in the terms of, $7 billion, although state bank is yet to announce the official number, which will be revealed during the negotiations with the review. The fiscal deficit, the budget deficit, there are 2 things that technically, one is called primary deficit, which does not take into account the interest rate payments, and one is called the overall budget deficit. So primary deficit, one of the conditions is that Pakistan should bring it into surplus, and the overall deficit is likely to stay about 7.3%, and that is, in line with what IMF is saying. But I'll remind the viewers here that globally, IMF's ideal range for a budget deficit is between 4 to 5%. So Pakistan remains above that, but it is below what we have been, showing in the past. How Pakistan has done it? Pakistan has done 2 major, fiscal controls. Number 1 is that the development budget has been hugely slashed, which was almost 950 billion. From 950 billion, it has been slashed, and I think only 50 billion have been so far released for development projects. Second was about ₹1 trillion, were allocated for subsidies to industries and protection and others. And fund has also insisted that this subsidy should now, one should get away with. And Pakistan has, spent very little on subsidies. And these two major, interventions have brought in the budget deficit into some control. In terms of current account deficit, which is our external payments, Pakistan has managed to bring down the imports, but they have not managed to increase the exports. So by bringing down imports, so the pressure on external payments has gone down a little bit. But I must comment on two things here in the fiscal side. That Pakistan's, the interest rate has been kept at 22%, and 62% of Pakistan's borrowing come from local financial system. So there's a huge domestic debt burden in the budget, and I'm sure Ministry of Finance will hope to negotiate to somehow bring down the interest rate a little bit, because inflation has shown a little bit downward, and interest rate is linked to that, and that will reduce some of the liabilities of the interest payments to the government of Pakistan. In terms of the energy sector, the viewers must have seen that the gas prices tariff has been increased, and that is again in line with getting another 400 billion rupees, and also covering some of the losses of gas companies and the cost of gas at which subsidies were being provided. That is where Pakistan stands in terms of monetary discipline. IMF review will also look at monetary policy, and that i.e. mean that does Pakistan continue with a tight monetary policy, meaning higher interest rate, less credit to private sector, so that demand can be controlled. But I would advise that IMF should also see that Pakistan should not print, more local currency that will increase supply of money. Now, these are all technical things, and they are normally discussed with the IMF. Now, what does it actually mean for a Pakistani? Let me, try and answer a few questions. If Pakistan successfully completes this review, does that mean that Pakistan's economic revival will start and we will see growth, more jobs or exports? Unfortunately, my answer is no, but it will give some confidence to investors and institutions that Pakistan is the course correction has started, and signal is that where Pakistan has consistently failed, that can we sustain this discipline? Because this caretaker government has relatively less political pressure, but institutions and investors and bilateral partners will watch Pakistan, that how the political leadership after the next election, populism, do they just dole out money to their constituents or favorite projects or infrastructure, or do they stick to this thing which keeps Pakistan into trouble? Remember, the high fiscal deficit is the core reason for high inflation in Pakistan, and we have to control that fiscal deficit. Second part which I see, so yes, the growth will come, but it will take longer time. Would that make life of the poor or the middle income, white collar, blue collar people easier? I think next couple of years are going to be tough, because if we get into another IMF program after the standby arrangement, that would mean that economy will remain in a tight space or shrinking space, and we will not be able to create as many jobs unless the structure of our industry is strengthened and more productivity, more exports, and we manage to sell off some of the state-owned enterprises. These things take time, and so I see difficult 2-3 years ahead, and government should learn to sacrifice on their expenditure side. They should protect the poor by diverting resources from the haves to have-nots in this period. At the same time, government should come up with a very strong industrial policy as well as trade policy, so that people can have some confidence and exports can increase. One of the missing links is that we major sources of the inefficiencies are very high. We must, not push, in my opinion, for privatization of state-owned enterprises, but we must stopping the taxpayers' money going to these enterprises and perhaps put on independent boards and give them space to revive some of them. And the profit making perhaps could be sold out. Now, these will be the signals along with the IMF program, which will give confidence to markets, financial markets, investors, institutional investors, multilateral banks, bilateral partners to look at Pakistan with a progressive lens. If we, after the standby arrangement, get relaxed again and we come into populism and doling out taxpayers' money without accountability, without focus, without policy, which we have done for many years, I'm afraid this time the bailouts will not be that easy, and Pakistan should particularly be a nation which has the capability of show macroeconomic stability. At the end, basically, I would reiterate that all the commentators and the people of Pakistan must understand that it is not IMF program's role to basically revive the economic growth or stimulates economic activity. It is the role of our policymakers that if your macroeconomic indicators get stabilized, you should have very focused world-class policies that addresses Pakistan's economic fault lines like job creation, productivity, exports, technology transfer, so that Pakistan can move on the path of creating jobs for younger people, reducing our external liabilities, and gets away from wasteful expenditures like unnecessary infrastructure projects or doling out, popular schemes for your constituents. Pakistan needs to now take a very serious path. We have a trade-off that if we manage to get the next tranche and meet the, triggers and benchmarks set by IMF that direction, we need to very diligent on creating policy environment that moves towards sustainable economic growth for 240 million people. If we digress from that part a couple of years, we will be going for another bailout, and terms of conditions of that bailout would be harsher next time.